Good afternoon. Good afternoon, or morning, if it's morning when you're watching this video. This is the lecture or video on Chapter 1. We're going to be going through Chapter 1 of the textbook here and answering some of the questions, discussing some of the main points. I want to again remind you all of the information that is contained in the other videos in regards to all the assignments, question completion, and etc. Please make sure you are aware of them. And once again, these questions and these lectures are here for your convenience. I am making them so that you, the student, have the opportunity to learn in several different mediums. If you, as the student, would like to learn via just straight reading, you have the opportunity to do that in a sense. Although I am quite an entertaining person, so you may enjoy listening to me talk. No, I'm kidding. But also, some of you may prefer to switch it up and do lectures and answer the questions that way. So these lectures will contain, I will try to contain within each lecture, all of the questions that you are asked. It will not only discuss those things, just as the textbook doesn't discuss only those questions. Those questions are there to make sure that either you have watched the lectures or that you have read the textbook, so that you cover the broad emphasis in every chapter. And speaking of chapters, in Chapter 1, you will notice that it begins by talking about, as most history textbooks do, evolution and the ice ages and stuff. We're going to skip all that right away. As most of you know, evolution is not a Christian belief. I'm going to leave that for another class period, another time. I may have a little lecture on talking about evolution and the origins of the world, etc. But as for, we're going to start right away. We're going to start with page 6, in case you're wondering if you want to follow along in your textbook. Some of what we're talking about. We're going to start with page 6. In America, in 1400, there was a lot of people. When I say America, I'm referring to the Western world, okay, in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, in North and South America. There was a lot of people. It wasn't empty, as some of you may think. In fact, there was thriving civilizations. There was, in 1492, perhaps 54 million people in the two. 54 million people. Now that is a lot of people, especially for that time in world history. Why, then, did most of the people vanish? Because when it was settled, there was very few people here. And why, if there was thriving civilizations, wealthy civilizations in that time period, why are we not learning their history versus us learning the history of the Europeans coming here? Why are Europeans not learning the history of how the American Indians, Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans sent explorers over to the Old World? Well, there's quite a few reasons, but one of which is, and you're going to hear this theme consistently throughout the class, is that world history is inescapably linked to religion. And by religion, I mean Christianity. Without Christianity, the great exploits of our world were not seen. It is very hard to find an invention in our history, something miraculous that happened in the sense of world changing, that does not have its roots in religion. I'm going to have a whole other lectures on that, but I want you to remember this. The Americas were held. Some believe the Americas were held in quiet, or God kept them there for the religious freedom group, the separatists, the people coming out, the Protestants coming out, to build a new country, a model for the rest of the world, a city on a hill, as you might say. That is the belief of some Christian historians, and they have very valid evidence for this. We're going to continue talking about here specifically this class, but it's important to remember that religion is vital in Christianity. When I say religion, I do mean Christianity, and especially Protestant Christianity, but Catholic Christianity, which was all Christianity up until Martin Luther. Is you cannot talk about history without talking about the two. When I talk about Christianity, or if I talk about history, they're one and the same. A person cannot point to the happenings in the world without talking about the reasons why those things happen. And the reasons why those things happen always goes back to Christianity it was involved in one way or shape, especially when I talk about Western world. You will note that if you flip to page 7 or page 8 of your textbook, and I'm not going to do this about every time, just trying to get you so you know where we're going. And also question number 2, it says how many individuals were killed by some accounts at one time? 5,000 people. Our textbook says 5,000 people were slaughtered at one time to celebrate the crowning of an Aztec chieftain. This is something that was going on in the Aztec world, the Mayan world, the Inca world, especially the Aztec world, we really know, where they would attack, they would conquer tribes, they would capture thousands of people. They would then keep them at the temples. They have places they would keep them, and then when they were going to a celebration, they had a human sacrifice, and by human sacrifice, mass human sacrifice. Thousands were slaughtered, and the blood would literally flow in the temple, and that was their sacrifice to the gods. We often hear about how the Europeans came in and they imposed their culture on them. Yeah, they did. One of the main things they really imposed on them was they stop mass murdering thousands of people for blood sacrifices. That is one of the major. You'll find that basically in a lot of parts of the world. It happened in India. It happened here in Mexico, where the Europeans came in and said, no. You can't just mass murder thousands of people in human sacrifice for sacrifice to the gods. That is not acceptable. So when we talk about culture, there's good things and bad things about every culture. We're not going into that right now. But it is important to note, one of the major things that happened very early on was that the Europeans came in, or in this case the Spanish, Hernando Cortez, etc., came in and stopped these human sacrifices. There was perhaps as many as 20 million people living in Mexico. And this is a large number of people living in a place, especially that time in history. One of the questions you have to ask is why were the Americans, Indians, North and South American Indians, why were they so successful? Why was there so many people? When I say successful, they had thriving empires. They had complex social structures. The Mayans, the Aztecs, Incas, at various times were really thriving. And the answer to that is corn. Corn and agriculture allowed them for planting and then growing. This allowed for population growth. It allowed for, there was less warring. They weren't as reliant on specific areas for industry, etc. But corn, the agriculture allowed for a rather peaceful society in comparison to other parts of the world, where they simply planted corn, the corn grew, they ate the corn. That is a major something interesting. Corn, you often hear referred to as maize, but that is something that is very interesting. It's one of the major contributions of the New World, as it's called, to the Old World. When we talk about the amount of people in the New World, it's interesting. In 1492, there was probably no more than 4 million people in the entire North America. Now, 4 million people is possibly a third of the size of New York City, just for comparison. And it might be a tenth of the size of the New York City metro area. So that it seems like a lot of people, 4 million, but in comparison to today's population, where the United States has upwards of 350 million people possibly, 4 million is a very small number. Furthermore, you will note that massive numbers of people were killed by disease. Disease killed an awful lot of people. I want to talk about that a little more in a second, but I'm just going to mention this. When the North Americans, Indians, died out, and when the Europeans came, when the Puritans, when the Separatists, the Mayflower, Plymouth Rock, when they landed, there was not 4 million people in American Indians in North America. In fact, 90% of them had died. I did some quick calculations, and a rough calculation says it's somewhere around the size amount of people as the city of Cincinnati, maybe slightly more, or the city of Cleveland has in the entire North America. Okay, possibly as many as 400,000, maybe it's a little lower, but somewhere around 300 to 400,000 people probably were in the entire North America. So when the Europeans came, the separatists, Plymouth Rock, Jamestown, when they came, they found a land that really was there for the taking. They weren't going and pushing people out. I mean, if the entire city of Cincinnati has around 300,000, or Cleveland has 400,000 people, that's how many were in the entire North America. Now, the way the Indians lived, they took up more space, all that. But it is important to note this: when they came, they were not just pushing people out. There was massive empty space prepared, ready, and waiting for them. Now, again, that was caused by disease, but that was not. It was not the settlers and the colonists' intention who came. They didn't intentionally come. They came after the disease had basically wiped out most of the North American tribes, as well as the South American tribes. We're gonna jump here to how the indirect discoveries of the New World. There's various discoveries of the New World before Christopher Columbus. I'm not going to spend a long time on them. I think they're insanely fascinating. You can look up and you can find, in fact, there was maps drawn possibly of the New World before Columbus. We all know about, if you in your high school or elementary school history class to these days, we talk about how the Norse were here first. We know that Leif, I believe it was Leif Erikson, landed in up in from Scandinavia, and then Iceland and Greenland, and then all the way over here to probably Newfoundland or somewhere around there. There's also others that came. We don't know all the people who came. In fact, there's a lot. It's hard to separate legend and truth. We have stories of 14